I probably hear that terminology. I think I have black mold like multiple times a week. At this point, everyone thinks it's such a stigmatized like verbiage around the industry, and a lot of people can take advantage of that like stigmatism and the intensity and stuff of the terminology. Stachybotrys can cause, headaches, fatigue, brain fog, seizures, more intense type of things. And then you have like more humidity-based molds like aspergillus or penicillium that can cause like more allergenic issues at the start and then more neurological symptoms and stuff later. Mold uses a defense mechanism called mycotoxins where it actually creates a neurological toxin or a chemical that it produces into the air whenever it feels threatened. Mycotoxins are the cause of much more severe like autoimmune type of symptoms, seizures, memory loss, the list goes on and on. GI issues, digestive, lack of sleep, like there's a lot of things. That's why it's really important to work with a remediation company that is knowledgeable about mycotoxins, because normal remediation protocols and procedures can agitate mold to produce mycotoxins.
We're back with Caleb from Spotless one more time, and today we're going to be talking all about black mold. Now, you might have black mold in your home. You've probably heard about black mold. You've seen horror stories in the newspapers and whatever. But Caleb, you deal with this kind of stuff every day in and day out. So when someone comes to you and they think they've got black mold, what do you say to help them understand kind of what matters about black mold, when it's worth panicking, when it's not worth panicking, when they need to get you guys in? Yeah.
Sure. I probably hear that terminology. I think I have black mold like multiple times a week. At this point, everyone thinks it's such a stigmatized like verbiage around the industry, and a lot of people can take advantage of that like stigmatism and the intensity and stuff of the terminology. Black mold is a thing. What they're actually referring to is Stachybotrys, which is like the most commonly referred to as toxic black mold. It is a mold that is usually caused by an intrusion of water into the home. So wet building materials, floods, specifically like water damage, different things like that. Not so much caused by humidity like other types of mold. So the Stachybotrys, that is where people have a misnomer. There's a lot of molds that are black in color. So I usually tell clients like, you don't know unless you do laboratory testing, but I always fall back to like the explanation that all molds can cause like relative health issues, whether it's allergenic or in the case of Stachybotrys or toxic black mold, more neurological in nature. So Stachybotrys can cause, headaches, fatigue, brain fog, seizures, more intense type of things. And then you have like more humidity-based molds like aspergillus or penicillium that can cause like more allergenic issues at the start and then more neurological symptoms and stuff later. I fall back on here in the US, the EPA has stated recommendation that any mold present in the living environment needs to be professionally remediated and addressed. So I don't really have like a differing opinion on what type of mold that I'm dealing with, which is an education point for a lot of my clients that I have to take, is that, the type of mold doesn't change how I would go about remediating it necessarily. You don't use like extra, solution because it's like Stachybotrys, it's the same consistency, which is really important to remediate mold because all molds are susceptible to the same types of remediation. But whenever I'm dealing with clients that are having a lot more of those neurological symptoms or have had repeated water intrusions or different things like that, it does change how I go about like my inspection style. It's a lot more emphasis on finding the source of what is causing that water damage, trying to figure out, it just changes how you frame things. Because whenever I go and look at a job that's more of a humidity based issue, then I'm probably going to go looking at the HVAC system first and, these different areas that cause it. So different types of molds can change the inspection style, but the result is the same at the end as far as the remediation goes.
Yeah, and I find that so interesting how the species of mold has such a bearing on the symptoms that you're likely experiencing as well. We talk about mycotoxins and different molds release different mycotoxins. I don't know if you can explain a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just a brief explanation is mold in of itself is an allergen and it won't affect everyone the same way. Some people are a lot more susceptible to it. Mold uses a defense mechanism called mycotoxins where it actually creates a neurological toxin or a chemical that it produces into the air whenever it feels threatened. So, whenever mold comes in contact with other mold, whenever it has a change of environment, whenever it's like forcefully messed with or anything like that, it can produce mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are the cause of much more severe, like autoimmune type of symptoms, seizures, memory loss. The list goes on and on. GI issues, digestive, lack of sleep. Like there's a lot of things. So mold in of itself, like mold exposure is more allergenic in nature. Mycotoxin exposure is more neurological, in my opinion. But obviously there are outliers and stuff in each one of those cases because it
Yeah.
just changes on an individual basis. But that's why it's really important to work with a remediation company that is knowledgeable about mycotoxins because normal remediation protocols and procedures can agitate mold to produce mycotoxins. And if you're not doing something to address the mycotoxins produced by the mold whenever they're agitated, then you can result in an unhealthier environment even after the mold is removed, if that makes sense, because it'll increase the
Yeah.
mycotoxin exposure in the air. And then you're stuck with that, but you will get positive or negative post tests and stuff for mold all day long and still not figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, do you get that kind of mycotoxin bloom whenever you do any remediation work? And kind of how do you deal with that in someone's home who's already sick? How do you manage that exposure?
It's It's very dependent on the type of mold that you're dealing with. That's why whenever Spotless does remediation, we always take the procedures and stuff in place to whether we know that that mold is going to produce the mycotoxins or whether it's not. It's a very fickle thing because it's a living organism. You just don't know how it's going to react to the treatment that you're exposing it to. A lot of it is very heavily containing off areas that you are working in. If you're doing an individual removal, say around a window or something like that, containing that off negative air pressure, HEPA vacuuming, spraying and treating, physically wiping down those surfaces with a chemical that's rated to treat for mycotoxins. All of those is kind of have fallen into our process to leave homes healthier whenever we, finish our projects.
So you said you speak to a lot of people who think they've got black mold in their home.
Yeah.
What sort of things are you looking for, or what sort of things could homeowners look for that might suggest that they do have a significant mold problem, particularly for black mold?
I think that being very attentive to your body and how your body is responding is the most important thing. I think that, especially in America, but worldwide, we've fallen into a case of being like not self-aware of some of the health issues. It's just, it's a effect of like the medical industry and different things like that, where we are just saying, oh, I have headaches. I just have headaches now. I'm just going to take headache medication. Or, yeah, my hair is falling out and no one else in my family's hair is falling out, but it's just something that I'm dealing with. And that's just the case. Or my daughter has eczema and, neither of us have eczema, but surely it's just a genetic thing. I think a lot of mold exposure can be attributed to your body. I always ask clients, like, have you spent any time outside of the property here recently, like on a small trip or something like that? Or if it's a severe case, like, do you feel better when you go to work and you feel worse whenever you come home? And when they're like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, it shouldn't be that way. Like you should come home and
Is
feel
that not
healthy.
normal? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I think we just move so fast as a society that we just don't pay attention to how we feel anymore. And then, I think that a lot of our medical industry is so intensive on treating symptoms that it's gotten so easy, which is great. I'm glad that we have all of the pharmaceuticals available that we need to treat specific things. We've made so many advances medically, but we've advanced so far that it's become too easy to just treat the symptom instead of the problem. I've had a lot of clients go through mold remediation that just feel better after their house is taken care of and their bodies can start detoxing and stuff. And they've been, on medications for several years trying to treat these symptoms, but it will only counteract what they're getting exposed to. And it's going to be an ongoing cycle. You'll take that for the rest of your life until you move environment or fix the environment. So I was just at a woman's house today, actually, that was having a mold issue. And I was asking her these same health problems and different things like that. And she was like, yeah, whenever I go upstairs, I do get headaches. And oh, my husband is irritable and he does have lack of sleep and he has been losing his hair and all of. So when you start asking the relevant questions, I try not to be leading. I just ask them if if they've been dealing with these things before I get into the whole like mold exposure thing. Because I tell people I'm a natural placebo effect type of thing. I can make people feel a certain way because I'm at your house to find mold. So then people, if you frame things the wrong way, people can say, "Oh, it's because of the mold that I've been, my left elbow hurts," and it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's probably because you're playing tennis or fell or something like that. Like it's not necessarily the mold, but it just goes into a lot of what I do is explaining things in a way that gets the honest answer without leading clients down the wrong path.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, when they're looking in their home, like what apart from their bodies, is there anything like on the walls, anything they could actually spot that may think, oh, this is an area of concern for me?
Yeah, I tell people, I would say the average population does not look at their ceilings. Probably 80% of people don't look at their ceilings on a constant basis. And it's so surprising that whenever you go through and you start to look at things like and pay attention to your house, because we get home and we're exhausted at the end of the day. But just having like that in your day in your maintenance routine and stuff to go around your home and look at like the closet ceiling that you haven't looked at in 6 months, like look at around your HVAC system, check your water heater, like any sources of water, any sources of humidity, any areas that you just don't look at very often. Like that is one of the best preventatives because maybe you can catch a problem before it gets really, really bad. So I would say that if people were more attentive to their bodies and they were more attentive to their homes, then a lot of these problems and stuff would get caught pretty early. And now that is to say a lot of mold issues and stuff can remain hidden. So some things that you can start looking out for is baseboards separating away from the walls, any signs of water damage, water coming down the walls, that maybe the ceiling is buckling a little bit, maybe your floors are buckling. If anything is like shaped differently than what it should be, which is mostly flat, that is one of the biggest things. And then I guess I can give a little insight into my trick that I do. If you go into a basement that has a pretty significant mold problem and you can smell it in the air, one of the first things that I do specifically on like wood surfaces is I take a really high powered flashlight and I take that flashlight. And if you put it, say I was trying to inspect this wall, if you shine the flashlight on it, it'll look normal. But if you shine the flashlight down or up, you can actually see mold spores that are present without looking at it head on. It can look perfectly clean.
Mm,
But if you turn the lights off and you're checking a piano or wooden panels on a wall or something like that, that's one of my favorite tricks. So whenever I show clients that, they're just like, my gosh, I didn't even see that. And I walk by that every single day. So mold it's evolved in a way to stay really well hidden. So if you know little tips and tricks and stuff like that, but I do that every single day. So I've learned how to, look for it. It's
yeah.
mostly just, I'll check all of the water sources whenever I go into a home. I'll check the interior of the HVAC system whenever I go into a home. Like I'll take the filter out, I'll look inside, I'll put my phone in there, I'll take pictures. I've got a borescope, I'll take pictures. I would say that those are probably the most common areas that, have mold issues and stuff in residential environments.
So let's say someone does that kind of inspection, they realize they got mold somewhere. But what are the risks of them trying to clean that themselves? Because you read online, people say, "Yo, use bleach, use vinegar, use this spray that you get at Walmart or whatever." Like,
Yeah.
what should they do?
We've done a lot of internal testing on some publicly available products and remedies and have not gotten the best results. And I've also had a lot of clients attempt to self remediate, which I encourage people to be as involved as they want to. I've worked with a lot of clients on some flexible things. I definitely draw the line at dealing with the mold directly because the commercially available products that are used to remediate for mold and have been tested by the, EPA and all of these different, national standards, those products that have been tested are dangerous to use. And that's why they're not publicly available. Because if you get it onto you, like it can be a danger. So that is why I encourage people to work with a professional remediation company because we have tools and solutions that are available to us that are not available publicly. Because if they are misused, then it can cause a bigger problem or potentially cause harm to the individual that's using it. So all of our people are trained to handle these things and to handle the mold. And there's a lot that goes into it. Home remedies and stuff. I've had countless clients attempt home remedies and, call us back whenever the issue gets worse. And then the issue with bleach, I'll bring up bleach specifically because I know the scientific explanation for it. Sodium hypochlorite, which is a component in bleach, will have a visual effect on mold. The issue with sodium hypochlorite, which is the part in bleach that people are saying it kills mold, it will look like it will get rid of the mold, but it doesn't stay wet enough for long enough to penetrate into the surface that you're spraying. So drywall or wood or something like that, the actual stalk or the part of the mold that needs to be treated for the mold to successfully be remediated and moved, it'll just grow back stronger. So we call it like giving mold a haircut. A lot of clients will spray bleach on it. It'll look great for a couple of months and then the mold will come back, in full force, because whenever bleach breaks down, it breaks down into water and then it feeds the mold and then the mold comes back
Yeah.
like even stronger. So that's my little spiel on using bleach on mold. I love, specifically in America, we have a culture around people capable of doing their own things. I think that's something that we've been losing out on, and I want people to be able to still do that. When it gets to the point of doing the science and the actual like chemical usage and different things like that to deal with the mold, that's where I draw the line in the sand and try to encourage people to work with a professional.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty fair. So when someone hires you and you come in and it's a black mold situation, obviously you need to get the mold out of there, but beyond sort of ripping the drywall off the walls, what do you guys do? Like, what's the process?
Okay, I can give an example. Say you have black mold on around a window that's been leaking or something like that, and you've tested it, Stachybotrys, like you definitely want to get it taken care of. The essential protocol is to establish a contained area with plastic around that surface. So whether you're building like a box containment or you're containing off the room, you just want to not cross contaminate the rest of the house. So a lot of it goes into protecting, because once you open a surface, like mold has a tendency to, spore and go, in multiple places. So setting up containment, setting up negative air pressure, which means that the air is getting pulled out of the containment instead of like blowing back into the containment essentially. So you're just wanting to draw out as many particulates and stuff as possible, meaning that you want a draw of air outside of the containment into the equipment and stuff that you're running and get it out of the workspace. And then you open the cavity, tearing up. People say, oh, you're just going to demo or tear out drywall. It's so like particular about how we do it. It's HEPA vacuuming while that you're making your cuts. Once you open that surface, you need to bag the drywall within the containment, so that way when you take it out of the containment, you're not cross-contaminating. You have to remove the insulation, spray and treat the exposed building materials after that they've been HEPA vacuumed, and then you're assessing for the source of what has caused the mold growth or the water source. If you're see daylight or a puncture or a window that's been leaking or something like that, you document that and give it to the client. So a lot of what goes into what we do is not causing an issue elsewhere in the house. And that's essentially what you're paying for, is that the problem that's being addressed will stay a problem in that area. And then outside of that, we have a couple of whole home remedies whenever the mold's made its way into the HVAC system via fogging or fumigation or different whole home sanitizing type of things that will help clients that are particularly concerned that the mold has made its way elsewhere in the house already.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of on that point, at what point do you say this room, this home, it's not actually safe for you guys to be in here until this is dealt with?
I always leave that discretion to the client and how they feel in the environment. I don't want to be the fear monger that's going to come in and tell them that their house is not safe to live in. They've been staying in the home. I explain to people the health effects and stuff that can happen with mold very clearly. I explain to them the parts of the house that are dealing with the issues, but also that it could, be in other areas in the HVAC system or different things like that. And then I ultimately let the client make their own judgment on whether they feel safe to stay in the environment or not, because I don't think that it's my professional call to tell them to like leave until remediation is done. A lot of people ask me what I would do in like, what would I do in this type of situation in my home or something like that, like subjective questions. And I just try to shy away from those. I say, here are the facts. Like, your home has mold, you are dealing with these health problems, your son is dealing with these health problems, your husband is dealing with these health problems. If you feel more comfortable and you feel better outside of this house, then by all means you can go and find somewhere to stay. If you feel like that'll be important to your healing process until this is remediated, and we'll work with you to get it done quickly. And I let them make their own decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the only fair way to do it, really, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a tough one. A lot of people ask me, those are some of the harder questions. Contents are another hard question. Like, what do I do with all of my stuff? Are my things contaminated? And I usually just use a lot of previous stories to just give clients, like most of the time, clients are reaching out to me. This is their first time ever dealing with this, and it's still kind of a taboo subject. So they don't want to make a call to a family member to see if they've dealt with mold and stuff like that, because I think it's improperly attributed to like a dirty living environment or like an unclean living environment, and that's not the case at all. Mold can happen in any house, any format, any age of home. I've worked in new constructions and like just finished built that have a mold issue, and I've worked in houses that are hundreds of years old that have mold issues. So mold is not prejudice against age or construction style or anything like that. And some of the bigger projects that I've ever done have been caused by people trying to prevent mold that went too far. I mean, there are just so many factors and stuff that can go into this. So I always try to tell clients to just make their own judgments on things. I give them past experiences. That way they don't feel like they're alone in dealing with this, or that they don't feel uncomfortable talking about it with people. And then I always encourage them, like, if you see someone that's been dealing with a lot of health issues and stuff like that, encourage them, like, hey, have you ever had your home inspected for mold? Like, that was my issue. So the more time that we spend not talking about mold exposure, the more people that will continue to stay sick, and they just don't have to be, which is the most frustrating part. And I'm devastated by probably how many houses that I drive by in a day that have a family in it that's dealing with this, that just haven't had the right education or the right person reach out to them just to bring it up as an idea. Because typically doctors and different things like that aren't trained on environmental factors. So environmental factors are just a lot that goes into, our living environment and our health and different things like that. They're trained on how to treat different symptomatic issues and stuff. So yeah, that's how I encourage people on tough questions and stuff like that, is to just make their own professional judgment. It's their health, it's their body, it's their family. I just tell them like when the remediation can be done, how long that it'll take, and then let them make their own decision based off of that.
yeah, just on the contents, this is more an out of interest thing and kind of last question. I know a lot of functional medicine practitioners will say if you want to heal from mold properly, once you leave the moldy home, you've got to ditch all your clothes, you've got to ditch all your possessions, because you don't want to recontaminate your new home.
Sure.
Like, what's your take on that? Have you ever heard of like mold coming back because someone didn't kind of replace all their possessions? I've dealt with a couple of issues where that has been the case, and people have cross contaminated and stuff, new living environments, and it's very emotionally draining. Mm.
And it's very difficult, I think, for people to remove contents and stuff from their lives, because sometimes content restoration can cost more than the actual value of the content itself. So I encourage people that things like antiques or sentimental value, please by all means restore those. Most things now, there are products and stuff available, and we've given clients some different like laundry protocols and stuff, that most things can be sanitized with the right solution through laundry procedures and different things like that. And we've provided clients like those solutions and those cleaning agents and stuff, to be able to do that. So pillows, bedding, clothing, toys, those type of things can be successfully washed and remediated. And then hard surfaces and stuff, those can be sanitized through efforts like small particle cleaning or fogging. The one content that I draw the line on are large, plush, and porous contents like couches and mattresses. I would like to think that we're one of the most thorough mold and mycotoxin remediation companies, and I have failed post testing on mattresses multiple times. And whenever that happened to us, that I think that's just where we drew the line in the sand. I mean, it's just we know our own limits. We won't tell people that we're a perfect cure or a silver bullet. Like those, if those things are to get contaminated and stuff in a home, then you need to give serious consideration to replacing those objects for your health and safety. And that's what I tell people, and I let them make that decision, because ultimately it is their thing and it's their content. If it comes down to, I was just talking to a woman about this the other day. We were talking about the mattress conversation and my opinions and stuff on mattresses, and she asked about like post testing verification, like having the remediation double checked by a third party. And I was like, Absolutely. I encourage that. I love post testing verification. I think it keeps mitigation companies in check and makes people feel at peace that the work was done properly. I just tell them that that needs to happen within the working space. And if you're going to keep contents that, could potentially be affected or something like that, then they need to be put into another area that's not being post tested. That way, the company's not taking responsibility for those items. And that usually goes pretty well. People understand that logically, and they know that we can't like fix all of their problems in one go. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I get into a lot of tough conversations and stuff with people. I have had some people get rid of, all of their things. I've had a lot of people be able to successfully like clean and keep a lot of their things. So it's just very dependent on, there's a lot of conflicting information about it. And I encourage people to just take their information from a lot of different sources and then make their own personal judgment on it.
Yeah. You got to do the research, don't you? So,
Yeah.
yeah, man. Really appreciate your time. That's been so valuable again. And yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you.